You know how healthcare can be really expensive? Well, today I'm going to show you a strategy where you can make healthcare a whole lot more affordable, if not completely free. We've all been there. We're sitting at the hospital wondering how many arms and how many legs this is going to cost us. Pricing around healthcare is so vague and unclear thanks to the insurance industry, which is a completely separate podcast episode that we won't get into today. We are often left wondering, how much is this actually going to cost? Am I going to have the money to pay for this? I bet so many of you are wondering, can I afford this healthcare while paying for student loans, saving for a down payment on a house, and the million other things that we have trying to pull money out of our pockets? Today's completely legal and amazing strategy is going to show you how you can use an HSA to help you with cutting down on medical costs and help pay for your healthcare in the future using the gains of the stock market. And it also helps you avoid taxes. This is not an episode that you're going to want to miss. And it is an episode you're going to want to make sure to share with your friends. Because my wife and I, we've been doing this for years. And guess what? My wife gets free monthly massages now because of the growth in our HSA investments. So my wife gets to enjoy a little bit more relaxation and a little bit less headaches with these massages that she gets every single month, thanks to the power of our HSA. And now I'm going to go through the process today because it might seem a little complicated, but guess what? It's not that hard. You can all do it. It's all about keeping track of your expenses and making sure your HSA is set up in a way to make this work. It's super easy and simple once you really get into it. You do have to be a little bit careful about cash flow and your savings, all things that we're going to address today. And my goal today is to make sure that you have the knowledge to be able to take your HSA and make it pay for your medical expenses now and in the future through the growth in the stock market. So here's the game plan. I'm going to share how my wife and I use our HSA in order to get her free massages and free healthcare through over $2,900 in gains through investing. And then we'll dig into some powerful research that proves why this strategy is so amazing. And finally, we have a case study with Sarah, who is on track to have over $750,000 in tax-free money by retirement. Stick around because by the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly how to turn your HSA into a tax-free wealth building machine that could make your healthcare entirely free. So let's kick it off today with a little bit of a picture painting lesson of my wife and I's health insurance situation over the last few years. We thankfully had access to a high deductible health plan, which at the time of this recording is required in order to get an HSA, but that is changing with the One Big Beautiful Bill in 2016. And to give you some specifics on that, the One Big Beautiful Bill expands HSA eligibility starting in 2026 by allowing individuals enrolled in Bronze and Catastrophic Affordable Care Act health plans to contribute to HSAs, which is going to be a great unlock for people. So my wife and I, we've had access to this plan that allowed us to contribute to an HSA for quite a few years now. We really didn't know much going into it other than they were a good vehicle to be able to pay for healthcare expenses. And that's the key. That's the thing that so many Americans think. They think that these are a health spending account. It's a health savings account and it has a lot of power to be able to help you in that way. And thankfully, we did put a good amount of money in this account at first, but we didn't really know what to do with it. And then I learned all about HSAs through all the other great podcasts that are out there. I learned that they can be invested. Even though most employer HSAs may not allow this due to minimums and fees and whatnot, but move your HSA to Fidelity. Fidelity is by far the best HSA provider out there. So if you have an HSA anywhere else, do what's called a trustee-to-trustee transfer to move it over to Fidelity. We moved ours over, and thankfully you can do more than one of these per 12 months. That's another stat you'll see thrown out if you start doing research, is that you can only do one rollover per year. Well, with a trustee-to-trustee transfer, you can do more than one a year. But things to be careful of if you are transferring your HSA. Watch out for just stupid, ridiculous fees. This annoys me to no end. I had one of our HSA providers that charged no fees for this trustee-to-trustee transfer. And then our next one decided to charge a $20 fee every time we transferred money out of it via an ACH. And they closed the account. It wasn't an account closure, rollover, or anything like that. So please be careful of your employers-based HSA. They can be a little bit tricky with fees and minimums and whatnot. Really just stay away from them if you can help it. But if you do end up putting money into an HSA that's provided through your employer and whoever they partner with, as soon as you leave that job, roll it over with a trustee-to-trustee transfer to Fidelity. So thankfully, now that I've learned we could invest it and we got our money at Fidelity, we left it invested for years and years, and we saw it grow over that time. We used our cash flow to pay for our medical expenses because here is the key. You can reimburse yourself at any time for your qualified medical expenses out of your HSA. So I'm going to share the exact process here in just a moment at the end of this story, but we set a threshold to be able to reimburse ourselves. Right now, our threshold is $2,000, and I think we would probably have a conversation when we started to get around that point, because I don't think we would really need to reimburse ourselves yet. But you'll see in today's case study, this becomes a bit of a hidden emergency fund that we can tap. So in essence, it's saying, hey, my emergency fund is actually stored in my HSA, and then I can just pull it out whenever I need it because I have qualified medical expenses to reimburse. So let's get into it a little bit more here. You can set a threshold that works for you, but the longer and longer we leave our HSA invested, the longer and longer and more it gets to grow. And now the stock market can go down. That is worth warning you here. If your HSA is invested, you are going to see it go down from time to time. That is just what comes with investing. But over time, that's going to be so much less of a worry, and especially if you don't check it very often, who cares? Because as of the time of recording, our HSA is up $2,900. That is $2,900 towards medical expenses that we didn't have to use. Really, it's just the economy and stock market making us money. We're still leaving that money in there because it can continue to grow. We owe ourselves about $600 worth of qualified medical expenses right now. And let me define those real quick because there's a list online. If you just go to, I believe it's hsastore.com, or you look up qualified medical expenses, you can find some comprehensive lists online because they do have to be for qualified medical expenses in order to count as a tax-free withdrawal from an HSA. And now, like I said, we have $600 in medical expenses that we need to reimburse ourselves for. All of that is going to come from the gain. So I hope you can see how beneficial this is. And let me walk you through our exact process here. And you're also going to get to hear some examples in today's research and in today's case study. So here's our exact example of how we do it. We contribute to our HSA directly through Fidelity's website whenever possible. And there is a potential fourth tax benefit of avoiding FICA taxes if you contribute through your employer. But like I mentioned, the fees or having to deal with your work's payroll may not be quite worth it. But if your work does offer an HSA contribution on your behalf, make sure you're taking advantage of that because it's free money, which even more increases how much those gains are worth. So we contribute money directly to our Fidelity HSA. We invest in FZROX, which is a total stock market fund, but make sure you choose what is good for you and do your own research on your timelines because you never want to take a specific investment from someone else without doing your own research. And then we make a medical expense, and I take the receipt from that medical expense and save it to a Google Drive folder for that year, and then in a subfolder called HSA receipts, and I just leave it in there until we need it. And this is where the tracking comes into play. I have a spreadsheet where we log all of our qualified medical expenses with date, amount, merchant, and then just a simple checkbox that you can insert on your spreadsheet saying receipt saved and expense reimbursed. That way I know if I have the receipt already saved and I know if we've already reimbursed that expense. It's as simple as that. And then we just wait. When we need the money, we will simply sell some of our investments and send ourselves a reimbursement from that account. Fidelity or whoever your HSA is through doesn't care or need the proof that it's a qualified medical expense. The only one that would care is the IRS if they ever ask. But make sure you're doing this legally and actually using it for qualified medical expenses because I wouldn't want to deal with whatever you would have to deal with if the IRS audited you and you were using an HSA for non-qualified expenses for years. I think that would be a pretty big headache. And I really hope that helped paint a clear picture for how you can use the HSA and how my wife and I like to use our HSA. A lot of the research we're going to talk about next has to do with the benefits and details of an HSA. And then the case study is going to walk through a deep dive into how someone just like you and I has used their HSA to set themselves up for really free healthcare for the rest of their life and a potential amazing retirement account. So let's keep this train rolling and get into today's research about the HSA. I want to start off with an article from Fidelity talking about HSAs for 20s and 30s. And this specifically targets us because it's going to talk about how starting early has so much power for compound growth in your HSA. They have 6 steps that I want to share with you today here, and you can see those on screen. First is that HSAs can be your emergency medical savings. I want to start off today's research with a quick mention of an HSA guide that I have built that I'd be happy to provide to each and every one of you. It covers really everything we're going to talk about today and gives you a step-by-step walkthrough overviewing the HSA. So if you want the PDF document, please just leave a comment or send me an email mentioning the HSA guide, and I'd be happy to send it your way. If you really do have to use your HSA, please use it. Don't feel like the money is locked away forever. It can be a medical savings that you use regularly as a medical spending account. This was a hurdle for my wife when we started investing money through our HSA. She felt like I was never going to sell it and that I was always going to come up with some excuse to use our other money so that we never had to touch our investments, because she knows leaving them alone is how they grow. But thankfully, when the time came up, we were able to sell some investments and reimburse ourselves, and this took a lot of pressure off of our HSA for my wife, and she knew that we would use it if we had to. The second thing that Fidelity shares is that HSAs can also help pay for certain healthcare, vision, or dental costs. We use our HSAs to help pay for our eyeglasses. So you can use your HSA to make that cost free, because maybe you find cheap eyeglasses and the growth each year in your HSA is more than enough to cover your eyeglasses. So that's a great benefit for us there. And it's also great when you find something on Amazon like a neck massager that is HSA eligible. But make sure to do your own research about what qualifies as a qualified medical expense. Like I said, hsastore.com is a great place to go to just check if what you're thinking about buying with your HSA is actually eligible. The third thing here is that HSAs can help you save for future medical expenses, because the growth can actually pay for future medical expenses by itself. But what if you have a big procedure come up? Not only is your high deductible health plan likely to cover 100% of the procedure after you hit that deductible, but then you have your HSA to lean on in order to pay for the rest of it. And you have your HSA growth helping you out. High deductible health plans and HSAs are great for those who go to the doctor very, very little or a ton, because either you're hitting that high deductible and everything else is covered, or you're not even getting close to it and you're just saving a ton on your premiums. The fourth thing that Fidelity shares is that HSAs can grow over time. Like I said, ours has grown $2,900 over the last few years, and that is amazing. It's incredible what time can do, and this can happen for your HSA as well. Please send me an email if you want to walk through how you can set up your HSA to help pay for your medical expenses now and in the future using investment growth. The fifth thing that Fidelity mentions is that your employer may actually give you some money for your HSA. My last job gave me an extra $50 per paycheck that went straight into my HSA. That's free money. Who doesn't love free money? So just like your 401k match, make sure you're taking advantage of any HSA contributions that your employer is trying to give you. And remember, these do count towards your HSA contribution limit, so just be aware of that. So make sure to take advantage of that free money that your employer would put into an HSA for you. And then the sixth and final thing that Fidelity shares is that an HSA offers a cushion when you change jobs. There may be a period in there where you don't have health insurance, and maybe you do have something come up. Guess what? You can tap your HSA for that, because HSAs never go away. Unlike an FSA that may go away at the end of the year, an HSA does not go away when you leave jobs or at the end of the year. You get to keep all of your money. And that would be a great time to transfer your HSA over to Fidelity if you change jobs, because then you get access to a whole lot more investments. The next article I want to talk about here is Betterment and what they call the Shoebox method. I call it the Dropbox method or Google Drive, however you want to save your receipts. But basically, they just help outline the strategy for saving your receipts and reimbursing yourselves in the future. It is as simple as that. But don't bother trying to keep paper copies. Just take a picture or scan the document with your phone and upload it to your Google Drive or Dropbox folder, and build a process to track and keep up with each and every expense. But don't make it harder than it has to be. It's a pretty simple spreadsheet with date, dollar amount, merchant, and then check boxes whether you have the receipt saved and whether the expense has been reimbursed. It's that easy. And I would be happy to share my template with each and every one of you. Just leave a comment on YouTube, Spotify, or send me an email. But I'm going to put up on screen here a quick example of the tax benefits that this earns you with an HSA. It's better than an IRA or a 401k or any sort of Roth option, because you get tax-free contributions, tax-free gains, and tax-free withdrawals. So that is the essential piece as to why you want to wait and reimburse yourself later, so that that tax-free withdrawal is as big as possible. Because if you can have a tax-free withdrawal of $80,000 because all your healthcare expenses have been saved over time, the IRS may ask you some questions about why you're taking that big of a withdrawal. But guess what? You're going to have all of your receipts saved and be like, here you go. And you're going to get to put the hammer down on the IRS and say, this entire $80,000 withdrawal is legal and tax-free. And if that happens, please let me know. I'd love to have you on the podcast to talk about what it's like to tell the IRS that you don't owe them any taxes, because that's what an HSA can do for you. And that is why the HSA is a worthwhile benefit and a worthwhile strategy for anyone who has access to one. And then, of course, this last common question that I get is, why would I not spend directly from my HSA? Isn't the money for medical expenses? Well, you too can have the growth that I've been talking about today in your HSA, and then you can use that money to reimburse yourself to pay for your medical expenses after the fact. You pay for them now, let the HSA grow, and then you reimburse yourself. But it's okay if you don't have the ability to do this right now and you have to use your HSA. That is completely fine. It's your money. If you need to spend from the HSA, do it. The vast majority of people consider it a health spending account. But if your budget and cash flow allow you to use them to pay for medical expenses now and you can wait for your HSA to grow, then please consider this strategy so that you too can enjoy the benefit of free healthcare. But what if you do end up holding onto your HSA until you're 65 or 70 years old and you don't use it all in time and you're maybe wanting to use it for retirement? Well, you can use the HSA when you turn 65 penalty free. Now, there will be taxable withdrawals if you're not using it for qualified medical expenses, but then it just becomes like an IRA where there's some tax on the withdrawals, but you don't pay any sort of penalty. So don't worry about not using your entire HSA while it's all tax free. You can still use it as an awesome retirement vehicle. And guess what? If you start early, it's going to be a massive retirement vehicle by the time you get to the point where you need to use it. So even if you don't use it all on qualified medical expenses, you're going to be okay once you hit retirement. And you know who's going to be more than okay? Sarah, in our upcoming case study. I'm going to walk through how she started when she was 23 and she's now 26 with more than enough money to save to become a massive HSA. And a lot of it is going to be tax-free. This is a super easy process with very realistic numbers and a not perfect health scenario, which I know gets so many people tripped up about using the HSA for this strategy. So let's get into today's case study talking about Sarah. Let's get into today's case study talking about how Sarah turned her HSA into a $47,000 healthcare fund. So let's introduce Sarah here. She's 26 years old. She's a project coordinator for a warehouse company, and she's making about $62,000 a year. She is single, which does matter for the HSA because there's different contribution limits, whether you're single or married, and on a family or single healthcare plan. But Sarah's starting point is pretty simple. She started her first real job after college in 2020, and she was overwhelmed, like many of us, by all these benefit options she was never taught about by anyone. And like many people, she just assumed the basic PPO plan like her parents always used because it seemed simpler. But in 2023, Sarah had began to listen to some financial podcasts and they were talking about HSAs. She was skeptical at first. She was worried that this was just another complicated product that an insurance salesperson was trying to push on her. But after researching, she decided to make the change to a high deductible health plan in order to get an HSA. So here was the decision, and here's some of the math behind it. Sarah's old PPO plan had a monthly premium of $180 that she was paying. Her deductible was $500, which come out to $2,160 in annual premiums. Her new high deductible health plan had an $85 premium that she had to pay, a $1,650 deductible, and her HSA had a contribution limit of $3,850 in 2023. Her annual premium cost was now only $1,020. So here was the math. She knew she was saving about $1,140 a year on her HSA, and while her deductible was about $1,100 higher, she realized that if she had a medical emergency, she would break even on the annual cost. But if she stayed healthy and avoided the doctor and avoided any hospitals, then she would come out ahead, plus she would be able to invest the money she put into an HSA. That's where it really clicked for her because she knew that investments would equal money and returns and growth in the future. So phase one for Sarah was to build her HSA strategy. She decided to contribute $2,400 a year to her HSA, and her employer contributed $500 a year to her HSA. That brought her up to $2,900 for the year. So she decided, and this is something I highly recommend, she kept the first $1,650, also known as her deductible, in cash. That way, if she did need to meet the deductible, she had money sitting there in cash in a health savings account that she could use right away. And now beyond that, after she saved what she needed for her deductible, she started to invest the remaining amount in her account through Fidelity, which she decided to use a simple 3-fund portfolio. She put about 70% into a US stock market fund, 20% into an international market fund, and about 10% into a bond index fund. So now here comes the first challenge that Sarah had to face. In July of 2023, she had her first health scare where she wasn't sure how she was going to be able to pay for it, right? She had some severe pain that sent her to the urgent care, and it was about $550. So now comes the question, does she pay it out of pocket or does she use her HSA to cover this expense? So instead of using the HSA to pay her bill immediately, she paid with her checking account and some cash that she had. And she, of course, saved all the receipts and any sort of documents that she got about the bill into a dedicated folder on her Google Drive account. And now this was because Sarah realized she didn't have a timeline to reimburse herself. So she was going to try out this strategy with just one expense, which is something I highly recommend just to see how it makes you feel and whether you enjoy this strategy or not. But she was able to leave that $550 in her HSA, completely invested in the stock market, and reimbursed herself years later, or potentially never. The growth was all going to be tax-free for whatever she pulled out of that $550. And now here is the power of compound growth. By leaving that $550 invested and growing at about 8% per year annually, her $550 would double in 9 years, which is a bit of a conservative estimate, which means that doubling would allow her to pay for that urgent care visit completely free in 9 years. If you just leave it alone, 9 years, $500, who cares? Just leave it there and let it grow, and then you're able to pay for your healthcare expenses completely free. Now this moves Sarah into kind of a phase 2 for building out a full system for her HSA contributions. In 2024, she was able to see a raise and started contributing more money to her HSA. She was nearly maxing out the 2024 limit into her HSA and had about $580 worth of medical expenses in the year 2024. She paid out all of the expenses right out of pocket and saved the receipts, kept everything written down nice and easy. And the simple spreadsheet just said, yeah, I have all the expenses saved, all the receipts saved. Here's all the expenses. None of them have been reimbursed yet. And then when she does reimburse them, she can just put a check in that box. And it's as simple and easy as that. Now she has about $1,100 that's able to be reimbursed to her at any time. And now that Sarah has been contributing consistently for nearly 3 years, she got another raise and was able to continue maxing out her HSA. She is now closer than ever to having a supercharged HSA because once you get even a little bit of money into those, that's going to help you out a whole ton. And in 2025, she got about another $1,200 worth of medical expenses. So now, how does this contribute to all of Sarah's growth that she's surely seen in the account over these last couple of years? Well, Sarah put about $9,900 in, including her employer's contributions. Her investment performance got it up to over $11,000. She saw about $1,500 worth of gains, and she has about $2,300 that she can reimburse. So she still has room to go on those gains in order to get up to that $2,300 mark, and then she could reimburse it all completely tax-free, all from the gains, and she's not even using her own money to pay for her medical expenses at this point. So what does this all mean? Well, if Sarah would have originally paid for that $550 urgent care visit out of her HSA, she would have missed out on about $120 worth of gain that's completely tax-free. And guess what? That $550 didn't ultimately end up impacting her savings. So there is a real strategy here at play that you can do in order to get money tax-free and pay for your medical expenses using the gains in the economy and the stock market. So of course, there are some long-term questions that everyone has when they start thinking about this strategy, and Sarah was no different. Sarah's first question is, when should I actually use the money? She's wondering if she should just keep it in the HSA indefinitely. If you're 26 to 40, you should continue maxing out your contributions, pay your medical expenses out of pocket, and save those receipts. The goal is to let the HSA grow as large as possible. Once you get to 40 or 50, if there's a major expense like a down payment on a home, you can now submit those reimbursable expenses and pull the money out of your HSA to use it. Let that money grow for a good 15, 20 years. Beyond that, you may want to use your HSA right away to cover those large medical expenses because you may not want to leave the money in there for a whole lot longer because once you reach 65, this is when it becomes a retirement account. You can use it for Medicare premiums, long-term care, or really any expense because there will just be taxes on the withdrawals if they're not for qualified medical expenses. But there's no penalties once you get to 65. So really the account opens wide up to use it for really whatever you want. The second question that Sarah had is, what if I lose my receipts? Don't worry about this and save them digitally. Do not save your paper receipts because what if they fade? What if the IRS comes asking about your $2,000 surgery that you used to reimburse from your HSA, but the receipt is broken or got lost in a flood? Scan them all and save them immediately. Make sure you have all of your receipts by the end of the year. Just do an annual checkup and make sure you save them all digitally. Question number 3 that Sarah has, what if I need the money for a non-medical emergency? Well, this is where your HSA can become a hidden emergency fund. And of course, you may want to sell some of your investments and keep them in a safer place, like a cash money market fund or something like that. If you have expenses that you can reimburse those to cover your expense if you need the cash right now. But let's say you need it and you don't have any expenses that you can reimburse. If it's before 65, you're going to face a penalty and taxes on the non-medical withdrawals. After age 65, there's no penalty, but still income taxes like a traditional IRA. So having those receipts and reimbursable expenses in the bank and ready to be used gives you that hidden emergency fund that can be used tax-free and penalty-free at any time. That's why this receipt saving strategy can be so powerful. And now here's a long-term projection I want to cover because Sarah asked, how much could this account really grow? Is it really going to make that big of a difference? So let's look at 26 to 56 years old, 30 years. Let's say you max out the contribution each year, you average 8% annual return, and you pay your medical expenses out of pocket. After 30 years, let's say you add about $180,000 to your HSA. The projected account value is $475,000 with that 8% gain, meaning you have about $295,000 worth of tax-free growth that you could be using towards medical expenses. Even if your receipts are on that low end of $1,500 a year, you're getting that all tax-free. You could have spent more money than that and still get it all tax-free. That is a ton of money if you continue to max out your HSA. So if you continue on past age 65 and longer, this account could easily approach $250,000. So by investing early and letting it grow, the stock market's going to work magic on your healthcare expenses by allowing you to reimburse yourself with tax-free gains and tax-free withdrawals. A couple key takeaways from Sarah's story. What she did right was start early. If you're in your 20s and you have access to an HSA, that is a gold mine that you need to consider tapping. Of course, if your parents' work is still paying for your medical insurance because you can be on there till 26, well, you should probably wait until then. But if you have access to an HSA and you need health insurance now, please consider this strategy. Leave a comment or email me. I'd be happy to walk through this benefit for you. The other thing that Sarah did right was automate it. And she built that cash cushion first. Build your deductible and keep it in cash. That way you're not forced to sell investments if you do need your deductible and it's during a downturn. But make sure you're paying expenses out of pocket, especially if you can afford it. Save those receipts so that you have flexibility on when you reimburse. Create a system, a simple spreadsheet to track your receipts, make sure it's easy and make sure they're digital. And invest aggressively. If you have a 30, 40-year time horizon before this money will really be needed, invest in stocks. And make sure you're taking advantage of those employer contributions. Just like a 401k match, you don't want to leave money on the table with your high deductible health plan and your HSA contributions. So that really does it for Sarah's story today. Couple things to help us all connect with Sarah's story. She's not rich. She's not making a couple $100,000 a year. And she started small with just little HSA contributions that are going to grow to be very large amounts of money in the future. And she still had real medical expenses. While not everyone may be spending a ton of money on medical expenses, most of us may find ourselves in a place where we do have some, and that's okay. You can pay cash for those and then reimburse yourself later down the road. And most people don't know how to do this with an HSA, so please don't feel like you're all alone and the only person that's not maximizing your HSA to the fullest. But please reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to help get as many people set up on this awesome HSA strategy and make it so that the majority of people are using these as a health savings vehicle instead of a health spending vehicle. But I really want to drive this home with a quote from Sarah where she said, "I used to think the HSA was just a boring medical savings account, and now I'm realizing it's the most powerful tool that I have. My 40-year-old self is going to thank me for starting this at 23. And a couple questions that I want to put up on screen for you as we round out this case study. The first one is, how do you balance saving receipts versus actually using your HSA when you need it? That's just something you got to work through and feel out. Whatever you do, don't head into it thinking it's completely black and white. Maybe at one point your threshold is $5,000 and at another it's $1,000. Maybe you're spending out of the HSA for a period because you have some higher medical expenses and you have lower cash flow. There's a couple different options you can consider there, but don't think it's all black or white. Don't think you either have to spend out of your HSA or you have to never spend out of your HSA. But question 2 for you is, what's the right cash cushion to keep in your HSA before investing? The answer to this is your deductible. Have your deductible in cash. That way, if you need to meet your high deductible health plan, you have the money available there should you not have it available in cash. Of course, you could still pay for it in cash and leave it in cash in your HSA and reimburse yourself later because there could still be a high yield savings account type option for your HSA. But the baseline should be keeping your deductible in cash in your HSA. The third question is this receipt banking strategy too complicated or is it worth the effort? It is by far worth the effort. Please consider doing this. My wife and I, like I said, get free healthcare because of the gains in the stock market and our minimal healthcare expenses. So please, this strategy is extremely worth it. And if you're thinking about doing it, please leave a comment and say, help me with this strategy. I would love to help each and every one of you get this set up because it can really truly be a huge unlock and a huge opportunity for your personal finances. But that does it for today's episode. The HSA, it's a powerful investing tool. We covered my personal story about how we have $2,900 in gains waiting to reimburse medical expenses. We talked a lot today about researching how the HSA is so useful and talked about the Shoebox or Dropbox strategy. And then today's case study with Sarah was a real example of this strategy in action. Pay your medical expenses out of pocket with cash, save the receipts, and then reimburse yourself later from your investment gains in your HSA. Let that money grow tax-free. If you can reimburse yourself in 30 or 40 years, it's all going to be free money that you're pulling off of your stock market gains, and then your healthcare is free and being funded by economic gains and investment growth. And now remember, the HSA is still a valuable tool even if you're not using this strategy to the fullest. An HSA can still be a great savings vehicle to save some money on taxes, but using this strategy to optimize your HSA contributions is a huge deal. But if you got anything from today's episode and you're looking forward to future wealth building strategies, please subscribe to the podcast and reach out if you have any questions about the HSA template, determining if this strategy is workable. Please send me an email to fpyapod@gmail.com using the link in the show notes or just leave a comment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Financial Planning for Young Adults. Have a great week. And hey, quick heads up. This podcast, it's meant to be educational and it's for entertainment purposes. It's not personalized financial advice for your specific situation. So before you go out and make any big money moves, make sure you chat with a qualified financial professional who knows your full financial picture.